Gallen joining us 24/7 up there, covering all things Penn State. What's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm doing great, Jay. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, thank you, man. You've done such a great job covering the Nittany Lions, doing some research and just seeing all the things that you do there. Man, I mean, it's like what a great year it was. We'll talk in depth about Abdul Carter in a bit, but man, what a good year for the Nittany Lions. And a bunch of my friends down here in the Tampa area, we were speaking about the expansion of the college football playoff and looking at James Franklin, looking at the Nittany Lions, going, "This is you're the type of program that this can help." And it was great to be able to see them kind of make a little bit of a run there, wasn't it?
Definitely. I think going into the year, you really set the floor as making the college football playoff at 12 teams and also hosting a game.
Right.
And they really blew through that. They had hosted that game against SMU in the first round, best environment of the year at Beaver Stadium, I think. And then, you win the Fiesta Bowl, get to the Orange Bowl, and are, very, very close to getting a berth in the national championship game. It was, it wasn't completely unexpected, but when you're in the ride, it's kind of like, oh, we're still going. We're booking these flights, we're still moving. It was a very, very fun ride.
Has the perception now, well, let me ask if it has been affected at all. What is the perception there about Coach James Franklin? And did what happened in the 2024 season adjust and change that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's still a segment of the fan base that wants a national championship. That is the goal every single year. For some people, James Franklin has not been able to do that yet. You talk about, getting into the playoff. People will point out that the only reason they were in this year was because it did expand to 12 teams. I think that people still want to see them to beat Ohio State. That hasn't happened since 2016. There are some things that people still want to see checked off. But the reality is that the way that college football is structured now, you don't necessarily need to check off everything to get to the national championship. That's just how things work. But I
Do you
think,
think that changed the game though, Daniel? Because like I was one of those people that going into the season, I was wondering, will the regular season mean as much because it wasn't if I lose our everything's done, right?
Mhm.
Um, and it wasn't because what it ended up happening was those teams that were 12 to 6 or 8 to 16 were like, we got a shot like Penn State. But then I look back at it after the season's done and I look at it and I go, it is kind of weird that Ohio State lost to a lowly Michigan team and are still national champions. So how did you kind of break down how the whole season was with the expanded college football playoff as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go back to that game that Penn State lost to Ohio State in early November. It didn't necessarily feel as devastating
Right.
afterward as it might have in the past. I think the line from the players right off the bat was, we want to see these guys again. We want to get another shot at them, whether that would have been in Indianapolis or in the college football playoff. But I do think that with that view of things, I kind of went into the year with the same thing that, big picture, the regular season might be a little bit devalued, et cetera. But week to week, like you don't really feel that. Like it's still
Mhm.
life or death for the diehard fans of these teams. I mean, you look at how, the reaction to the Ohio State Michigan game
Right.
about, these games still mean something. Like after the Penn State Ohio State game, there's while the players were defiant, I think that among the fan base, among the writers, there's a sense that, this is a pretty big loss for the team in terms
Right.
of national perception and their standing on the national landscape. And so, I think that it's the easy answer to say, like,
Mhm.
oh, like the regular season's devalued, whatever. But it's easy to say that in July. It's easy to say that, in February right now. But if you're a diehard fan, you're still, week to week, every week is still a season. And so I think from that perspective, it hasn't changed. Maybe that'll change as we get a little further into this era and everything. But I mean, I still think that everything still means a ton because you
Yeah.
only get so many of these games. Every game is still such a big deal. That's the way that football works.
So now going into next season, what are the expectations, whether it's for the team, whether it's for James Franklin himself? Because now it's we talk so much about the adjustments in year one of the expanded college football playoff, but we also don't know how expectations from year one to year two are going to be for those teams that whether they lost in the first round or not, that ended up making the college football playoff because we've never gone down this road before.
Yeah, I mean, expectations are sky high. I know we're going to talk about the combine, and there's a big deal about the players who are there in terms of Abdul Carter, Tyler Warren, KJ Winston. But I think from a certain perspective, it's a bigger deal for Penn State, who isn't there. Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, like they got a ton of these guys to come back for either their senior years, fifth years. In some cases, guys are back for their sixth years, with COVID eligibility. So Penn State was able to retain a ton of key pieces who are going to play big roles for this team this fall. They also made some big moves on the coaching staff. You get Jim Knowles over from Ohio State. That's a coup. I mean, I think that kind of signals Penn State's intentions on the national landscape. And then you see they lose Jalen Sider, their running backs coach for the past 7 years. He goes to Notre Dame on Super Bowl Sunday. Less than a week later, Penn State hires Stan Drayton, who developed Bijan Robinson, going back to Brian Westbrook in the late 90s at Villanova. Someone who just has, Ezekiel Elliott, Carlos Hyde, just has a great track record. So, I mean, Jalen Sider was a very important coach to the staff and, the recent history of Penn State football. But you can look at it and say, oh, Penn State might have upgraded. So it's just been a very serious offseason in terms of the additions that Penn State has made to their staff and how they've been able to retain players. I think it sets the table that this is going to be a team that is going to be in the mix for a top 4 spot, for a bye, for the Big Ten championship this fall.
I like that. And I think having that not be the same Michigan, Ohio State, and having Penn State in there and having Indiana, right? Like that's good. I think it's good for the sport. Get some fresh blood, get some new faces in there. And one of the things, and this is just a selfish thing, I don't like when you have a really, really good player or a really, really good coach and they never are able to get over the hump. Like I hate that we have the Dan Marinos and the Charles Barkleys and the Stockton and Malones of the world, right? That I want James Franklin to be able to get his moment in the sun, right? I really do. Like, I just think it would be cool. He seems like a good guy. And, Penn State is battling, man. They're right there. They're on the cusp. They have some good players. They have some good teams. But obviously, nobody better than Abdul Carter and what he was able to do last year. I mean, Daniel, like that last game, there was no, like, is he hurt? Like, you could easily tell the dude was out there with one freaking arm, and he was still the best player on the field. Before we talk about kind of prospects and like what the forecast of him going forward is, what was it like to cover a guy like that this year for Penn State?
It was quite the experience. I think that every time he was out there on that defensive line, you could tell that he was. I think most times than not, he was the best player on the field when the Penn State defense was out there. Just the level of talent he had, the way that he played. I'm one of those people that I try to not pay attention too much to the officiating over the course of a game. I think that getting bogged down in that just makes it not fun to watch and to talk about and everything. But there's in the Oregon game and the Big Ten championship game. That's like maybe the one time I've been like, whoa, like this is a problem because of the way that Abdul Carter was playing. I mean, he would get held on pretty much every single play. He's just that good.
Yeah, there was one replay where you saw the guy's hand like inside go like this. And I was like, come on, man. Like that's right in the middle of everybody. How do they not call that? And I'm an equal, right? I mean, I'm a neutral. I'm looking at that. I'm like, geez, man, how do you could call holding, I know, on every play, but you're right, man. There was something like it was almost in slow motion. They're like holding this guy. It's nuts.
Yeah, my philosophy is always that it has to take a lot for me to say something, and
right.
that Oregon game was one where I was kind of like, what are we doing here a little bit? But I think that you just watch what Carter did and how he got better over the course of the season. He's someone who played the first 2 years of his career at Penn State at linebacker before moving down to defensive end last offseason. And he was coming off a 2023 season where he was really quiet. I know he was a first-team All Big Ten selection at linebacker, but he did not play as well as he did in 2022 as a freshman. And so he slides down to defensive end. It was one of those things where James Franklin was, really pumping the brakes on it a little bit during spring, where it was, it's a new position for him. There's still a lot to learn. But then by the time we got to the end of spring ball last April, Franklin was like, yeah, this is going to work. And all the players were like, yeah, this is going to work. And then it took maybe 3 games for Abdul Carter to really get rolling in the fall. But once he did, I mean, they played Illinois in a unofficial whiteout, and Carter comes out 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. And that was when I think we all kind of were like, yeah, this is the guy. And this is where, okay, first round talent over the course of the year in your head, it's like, okay, maybe this is top 15. maybe this is top 10. And then when you factor into the value of what a big edge rusher can do for you, we all saw what the Eagles defensive line did in the Super Bowl. Then you kind of go, oh yeah, this is a number one pick, top five material right here. So I think the one thing that stood out to me beyond the raw stats and playing through that injury in the Orange Bowl was over the course of the year, you saw him get better and you saw him take strides and add different things to his game. He's someone who's a student of the game, wants to be great. And I think that really shows through.
What about personally? Like, I know it's tough because we don't always get one-on-one, but is there any other like personal stuff? Because everybody's going to talk about like what they saw on the field and the sacks and stuff like that. Is there any insight that you could give us on like the person he was, or any personal background about him that you think could translate to him being a good pro?
I mean, I think you have to start with the confidence. He was saying in November, I should be the number one pick. I'm the best player in the country. He was saying, a lot of the Penn State stuff circled around Tyler Warren and the Heisman and everything. And Abdul Carter, I think after their season finale, was sitting there and was just like, what about me?
Yeah.
I should be in New York. I should be in the mix for the Heisman with what I've done this year. So I think he has that confidence that you need to succeed at that level in the NFL. I think that can go a long way. I think one of the more personal facts about him is that he grew up a diehard Eagles fan. He's from North Philly, or I think Philly, I forget where in Philly, but he's from Philly. He would wear an Eagles like little bracelet. And then, he was at the Super Bowl in a custom made Eagle sweatshirt that his dad got him with the number 11 on it in the Eagles print. Like, he is a diehard Birds fan. At the combine, he was like, that was kind of my finale of being a fan. After this, you put it to the side. But I've talked to some people who have, covered the NFL, covered the draft longer than me, and they can't remember seeing a player enter the process who was such a public fan of a team, which is a really funny wrinkle. Obviously, no way he's getting to 32. And I think that the Eagles are looking for maybe a little bit of a bigger fish to fry when it comes to the edge rusher market right now. And so that's just a funny, unique thing of him. And I think that adds a little bit of humanity where, Abdul Carter is obviously not like us in a lot of ways, right, but he's a fan. He loves the game and he has an emotional connection to it. An emotional connection to a team.
Oh yeah, cool. For sure. And I love that because it means he loves the game, right? So favorite, I mean, you think it would be a shock if he didn't get drafted number 1 overall? And then other than him, we got Warren. I mean, where else do you think the rest of these guys will go?
Yeah, I think with the projecting the number 1 pick, it's always so hard because the quarterback, how important a quarterback is, how teams value the quarterback, I think can a lot of times push down the best overall player in the draft. But we'll see. I mean, I think that if you're the Titans and you see him there, I don't necessarily think Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders and whoever else are sure things at the top of the quarterback board. And I think that you can bring in Abdul Carter and you can have a guy that you can set it and forget it. I think someone who's going to be disrupting quarterbacks for a very long time. So I think he should be in that, top 5, top 3, top 2 mix for sure. It just depends on how much these quarterbacks are valued and who needs a quarterback. And if someone trades up, to get in there. Warren is interesting to me. I think that in terms of overall players, he is definitely a top prospect in my view. He did so many things last season that I've never seen before on the football field, especially by a tight end. But how an NFL team values a tight end that high in the draft is interesting to me. I know there's been some research done that and crunching the numbers that taking tight ends super high in the first round isn't necessarily the best value. And so I'm curious to see where that ends up for Warren. I mean, I am honestly a little surprised to see him in the top 10 of some of these mocks. I think he's a top 10 player. But I think that when you factor in value and everything, that does raise my eyebrows a little bit, but it would be awesome for him to be able to go that high. So we'll see. I mean, I think that there's a really real chance that Penn State could have 2 top 10, 2 top 15 picks when we get to April.
Who else? Anybody else that is kind of top of the tongue of everybody in the Nittany Lions guys?
So the 2 safeties that Penn State has in the draft, KJ Winston and Jalen Reed, are going to be really interesting to follow. Winston got hurt in September. He partially tore his ACL in practice before week 2. Tried to play through it, wasn't right, elected to get surgery. He skipped his last year of eligibility. And he was getting a lot of All-American buzz, a lot of first-round buzz going into the year. And so he's someone who doesn't have a ton of tape. isn't ready to test just yet. I think that the expectation is he could run at Pro Day next month and go through some things. So I think that he has the right makeup. He was a team captain, said everything right, confident guy. I can see an NFL team being enamored with him and maybe taking a little bit of a flyer. But that's going to be interesting for me to follow. Jalen Reed, on the other hand, I think is a bit of a sleeper. I think he's someone who is going to rise up the boards over the course of the draft. His role changed on the team when Winston got hurt. He took on a more prominent role, both in terms of what he was doing on the field and in terms of his leadership. Really confident guy, no filter, tells it how it is. Just a great personality to have. Someone who has a chip on his shoulder. He heard what everyone was saying about KJ Winston last year, and he was kind of like, well, why can't you say this about Jalen Reed? Mm-hmm. Big plays in big spots, can do a lot of different things over the defense. He was supposed to play this role that was essentially a hybrid nickel linebacker safety last year, where he would have been in the box a ton and around the line of scrimmage. But when Winston got hurt, they had to move him back to a more traditional safety spot. But he was still able to affect the plays. James Franklin has said he's one of the smartest players he's ever been around too. So you're getting a really complete football player there. So I think Reed and Winston, after Carter and Warren are two guys that from Penn State that are going to have a lot of eyeballs on them.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see it more and more over the next couple of years with Penn State being at the top, and recruiting classes and transfer portal. It's becoming more and more of an attractive destination for people there that want to play in the Big Ten. So excited to see how it all shakes out. The one and only Daniel Gallen, 24/7, just crushing it, covering all things Nittany Lions. Check him out, Daniel. What is it, JT? Is it Daniel JT Gallen?
Correct.
Daniel JT Gallen. I like that, man. Covering Penn State again for Lions 24/7, 24 Sports. DBK? What is DBK? Diamondback Sports.
Yeah, University of Maryland. That's I'm a proud alum.
The Terps, baby. There you go. My dad's always like, what's up with their logo, man? He always gets thrown off. It's so funny. Daniel, thank you so much, man. You made our show a whole heck of a lot better and a whole heck of a lot smarter. Continue success. Keep up the great work, man. And we'll hopefully talk to you again down the road, buddy.
Appreciate you having me, Jay.
You got it.